I recently came across an article that baffled me. Having always been interested in psychiatry and just the brain in general, the case of April Burrell is something of an anomaly since medical mysteries like these rarely exist. It's almost straight out of a movie. For some backstory, in the 1990s, April was a top-performing student and the valedictorian at her high school. She had ambitions of becoming an accountant and was studying at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. It was at age 21 when she developed an underlying condition that would change her life forever. Out of nowhere, she suddenly became unaware of her surroundings, trapped in her own mind, and could no longer function normally in the present state of the world. She suddenly stopped communicating with others and was not able to perform everyday duties on her own. Her professor immediately notified April's parents about her sudden incoherent state, and she was immediately taken to the hospital and eventually a long-term psychiatric center due to the extent of her condition. All of the sources online are quite vague about what exactly happened that led to this point. They simply state that April had suffered a traumatic event which brought her to that point. Now, I'm very interested in what the event could have been, but the posts online stated they are not specifying the event because they want to protect April's privacy. I can understand why they don't want to disclose what happened, but knowing what occurred exactly would maybe be insightful to some degree. When an individual is a survivor and alive, key details are oftentimes omitted, which is, like I said before, totally understandable. Regardless, at the hospital, the medical professionals diagnosed April with schizophrenia due to how strongly her symptoms overlapped to the psychiatric disorder. To this day, schizophrenia, which affects roughly 1% of the population, has no cure and can directly impact how an individual thinks, behaves, and feels. As nightmarish as that sounds, this was all too real for her family when April no longer even wanted to engage with them through hugs, kisses, or other interactions. She essentially was behaving as if she didn't even know who they were, and they certainly felt like they lost a daughter and a sister. She was described as being in a lucid-like state, speaking to herself about mathematical calculations and using her fingers to draw what looked like numbers. Schizophrenia has no direct cause documented, but researchers believe that an array of factors can contribute to the development of this chronic disease, such as the chemistry of the brain, like an imbalance of neurotransmitters, genetics, and even environmental factors such as high levels of stress can facilitate and promote the development of the disorder. Now, this case is interesting because there is an outside witness to speak on April's case. Back in 2000, when this case had just started, basically, there was a medical student from Columbia University by the name of Sander Markx. He had chosen to visit April's psychiatric hospital in New York out of the more well-known hospitals. The hospital specifically was called the Pilgrim Psychiatric Center, and it's reported to house patients for as short as a couple months to as long as their entire life. And Mark's first days at the hospital would affect him forever. He crossed paths with April and saw something that would burn into his mind for life. April appeared frozen in time and stared aimlessly into space. She did not eat, speak, or perform any activities on her own, prompting the medical staff to literally physically maneuver and control her. His time at the psychiatric hospital was temporary as he was a medical student, and little did he know that in 2 decades, he will cross paths with April once more. He had successfully built his own research lab, 2 decades later and sent one of his co-workers to visit a real psychiatric center and see the patients and interact with them. This researcher went out to the Pilgrim Psychiatric Center, and lo and behold, he also came across April Burrell in the same frozen-like condition. And when he immediately let Markx know about this, it was like deja vu to him, because he was shocked to know that even after 2 decades, the individual he saw was still there and still showed no signs of improvement. With her family's permission, Markx set out to conduct research on April. Markx gathered a team of 70 people, including various different medical professionals, all specialized in the brain. After testing her blood work, they discovered something very telling. Antibodies that she was producing were literally attacking her body and directly damaging her brain's temporal lobe. She had lupus, specifically neuropsychiatric lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disease in which the body literally destroys itself. It can affect the brain by creating inflammation within the organ and around the nerves. Some of the symptoms of lupus affecting the brain are behavioral changes, memory loss, confusion, and trouble communicating. They realized then that lupus can be the cause of April's symptoms, which had always just been thought to be schizophrenia. The staff was very proactive and meticulous with her treatment. They administered 6 rounds of treatment spread in the course of months. Her treatment included immunosuppressive drugs and strong pulses of intravenous steroids. Miraculously, April showed signs of improvement very quickly. In one of the cognitive tests, they asked her to draw a simple clock. At the first round of treatment, she drew a scribble. During the second round of treatment, she drew what clearly appeared to be a half clock. And by the third round of treatment, she successfully drew a full-on clock. These results showed that April was regaining her cognitive state of mind and was responsive to her environment. She knew what was being asked from her. From there on, things only got better. She was able to recall all the details in her life before her catonic state. She recognized each of her family members, despite it being 2 decades later. She talked, hugged, joked, and spoke normally, as if she simply just woke up from a deep sleep. In 2020, April was finally admitted out of the hospital and deemed mentally stable and competent and healthy. This is all super interesting, like when I heard they were able to literally wake someone up after 20 years, and that individual could still literally recall all the details and faces and just about everything. I was in total shock. It just shows how powerful the brain is and how much we humans have yet to discover. I found it amazing that despite this hidden disease of lupus, her brain was still strong enough to recover and work after any possible damage that is sustained for all those years going unnoticed. Though the resources and articles online did not specify how much damage there initially was, if any. It's almost something from a movie, guys. I was hoping that we would get April's perspective on what it was like being in that catonic state she was in. Was it a blackout? Was she conscious of what was going on around her but not able to express that? Was she locked in but experiencing a different dimension of life? I'm very curious about that part. This medical breakthrough was so promising that hospitals were immediately notified to identify similar patients like April, patients who exhibited schizophrenia-like symptoms, but also actually had lupus, so that they can also try this promising treatment and also get a second chance at life. Another patient was identified, and she was similar to April. And they were successfully able to get a second chance at life like April, and she regained her psyche and was able to control her consciousness and just function normally. Her name is Devine Cruz, and she was experiencing issues since she was 9 years old. She was hearing voices in her head, literally. And these voices were very scary too, urging her to commit suicide, and very ghost-like images coming through her head, like honestly very nightmarish. Like April, she was initially diagnosed with schizophrenia, in addition to an intellectual disability, but she also had lupus, and that connection was never made. But after the medical breakthrough that we've seen with April, they were able to identify her issue. It was lupus all along, and her treatment was successful. So this whole case is just so promising and so inspiring. I really would love to know additional updates on both of these women. And I just hope y'all really enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting content.